everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Alyssa Shearer, and I'm the Director of Programming at March for Science New York City. And today we're joined by the wonderful Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, and we'll be discussing how we can bring the topic of climate change into every classroom, not just the science classroom, and also how we can encourage our education systems to divest from fossil fuels. And so just for a bit of a background on Dr. Hayhoe, there's too much to say in our short amount of time, but she is an atmospheric scientist based at Texas Tech University, where she's a distinguished professor and also an endowed chair of the political science department. And she's also a really excellent science communicator. She spends a lot of her time and effort working in that area. If you haven't checked out her work with PBS, she has this series called Global Weirding, which is really awesome. And also a book titled Saving Us, which is very encouraging and uplifting about how we can communicate climate change to friends and families in our lives, and hopefully motivate people to change and make a difference. And also all of her academic work and her communication work has been recognized by many awards and honors, but one that I thought that stood out was she was recognized as the flagship United Nations Climate Champion of the Earth. So that's just a short intro on all the things that she's done, but needless to say, we're very excited that you're here today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so first, in our brief conversation, I want us to begin chatting about how we can bring climate change into the classroom, kind of through like K through 12 classrooms. And the reason why I think this is important is because multiple surveys have actually shown that only about 40 to 50% of teachers are talking about climate change in their classroom. There was one survey done in New York City by the United Federation of Teachers that found, I think only like 52% on average were talking about it. The highest was in science classrooms, but still was only 54%. And then the lowest was in the arts and I think physical education. It was pretty low as well. But as we'll discuss, there are connections that could be made for those teachers to talk about it there. And then also a survey that was done nationally also found very similar numbers. Around 42% of teachers are talking about climate change in the classroom, but that survey also highlighted that 86% of teachers think it's important to be talking about it. So obviously there's a gap there. So my question to Dr. Hayhoe is, how do you think teachers can become more comfortable talking about climate change in the classroom, and how can we help close the gap on the 40% versus the 80% that think it is important to be talking about it?
Yes. So first of all, teachers are doing better than the general public.
Yeah.
Because according to the Yale program on climate communication, 2/3 of us don't talk about it, not even once in a while. So teachers are already ahead of the curve, which is really good news. And then another question that the Yale program asks people is, do you think that schools should teach about the causes, consequences, and potential solutions of global warming? And 77% of people across the US think that schools should be teaching it. So there is a lot of potential there in terms of there's widespread support for it actually happening. There's huge room for improvement, and there's a lot of phenomenal resources out there to help teachers do it. So what are the barriers? Well, this is a question that one of my former students, Casey Williams, actually looked at for his PhD. He surveyed science teachers across the US, science teachers specifically, to ask whether they did or not, and if not, why. And a lot of the challenge that our teachers confront is there is so much information they have to squeeze into not enough time. So they have to get through all of this really basic stuff. It's important to understand the basics of science, and often climate change and other topical issues get pushed to the back of the semester, and then if there's any room at the end, they kind of squeeze it in. So that's a curriculum issue, that climate change really needs to be woven throughout the curriculum. It's not really up to the teachers to do that. It's up to those who decide on the curriculum, which also speaks to the importance of not only voting in federal elections, but voting for school board elections, getting involved in the PTA, really plugging in your community. The other thing that teachers highlighted is they just didn't have the resources or the knowledge. And if science teachers feel like they don't have the knowledge, then how do other teachers
Yeah.
feel? And so one way that people as as non-students, as parents or other community members can engage perhaps is by offering to support teachers and asking them what they need and finding
Mhm.
some resources for them, because NASA, for example, has so many amazing resources on climate change for teachers. PBS does too. Our own Global Weirding series on PBS is used in all kinds of different classrooms, and I'm still hoping to develop educational resources to go with them because I know teachers use them. So that's a big part of it too. And then part of it is we still see climate change as an environmental issue.
Mhm.
And so people see it as that's just what we talk about in environmental science. And if we don't have environmental science, we don't talk about climate change. Well, climate change is an environmental issue, of course, but climate change is also an economic issue. It is also a national security issue. It is also a food and a water issue. It's certainly a poverty and a hunger issue. It is a health issue. Climate change is a biodiversity issue.
Mhm.
So you could tell me any class, and I could immediately tell you what lesson I would teach in that class to show them how what they're studying is directly impacted by climate change and how what they're studying is part of the solutions to climate change.
Yeah, totally agree. It's an all-encompassing issue and can definitely find ways to fit it in. And that's why I think for me, when I saw that the physical education part was so small on that one survey, that I come from a biomedical research background, so I definitely have read a little bit about the, medical like health impacts of it. So I think that's definitely kind of a, I don't know, not easy, but like a direct relationship that, those teachers could be bringing up.
I completely agree. And you can talk about the health impacts of climate change, but you can even get more specific and you can talk about the impacts of climate change on sport.
Mhm,
So the
mhm.
fact that football practices are getting shifted to early in the morning, the fact that they had to put a roof on a baseball stadium in Texas because they couldn't
Yeah.
air condition it. My colleague Jenny Vanos at ASU is a biometeorologist, and she and her students looked at things like the marathon route for the Olympics to make
Mhm,
sure there was
mhm.
enough shade so the athletes wouldn't get too overheated during the marathon. Then there's the whole issue about snow and the
Mhm.
fact that another colleague of mine, Daniel Scott, has calculated that if climate change continues unchecked, only one former Winter Olympic venue will even be viable in the future. So there is
Yeah.
all kinds of interesting things we can bring up. And if we can bring it up in phys ed class, we can bring it up anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important there too, because a lot of people really care about the sports and it's a social and like cultural thing for them. And so that I know a lot of your work deals with communicating about climate change, not so much through the science, but through the values that are attached with it. And so I think maybe sports and physical education could be a really great one. Yeah. Okay, so another question is, so okay, if we have teachers talking about it more in the classroom, students might think, oh, I'm learning about this, just in school. As we all know, a lot of times when you ask your student when they come home, what'd you learn in school today? They're like, oh, nothing. They might not want to really engage with their parents. But what
I have a
are some?
teenager, so I know exactly what you're
Yeah,
talking about. How was your day? Fine. What
yeah,
happened?
fine.
Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. But do you have any suggestions for students if they did want to bring it up to their families at home, maybe things they could change around the house or things that the family could become involved with together?
I absolutely do. And the first thing I want to say is that studies have shown that what kids say to their parents matters.
Mm.
So there was a really great study done in North Carolina where Danielle looked at the effect of teaching grades 6 and 7 kids about climate change, not the effect on their opinions, the effect on their parents'
Mm.
opinions. And she tracked them over 2 years, and she found that indeed educating the kids, middle school kids, had a significant and measurable impact on their parents' opinions. And I love this. One of their main conclusions was that daughters had the best chance of changing their hard-nosed dads' minds.
Mm.
So it really does matter. Now,
Yeah.
how to have those conversations, you could bring up things you've learned about how climate change is affecting places you love or people you love or things you love. For example, if you're, big into tennis, you know how climate change is affecting tennis. Or if you're learning about how climate change is affecting your neighborhood, putting people at risk.
Mm.
But also, it's so important to learn about solutions. And all too often, we spend 99% of our time on the problem and like
Mhm.
1% of our time on the solutions. And the solutions we talk about might be like national or international solutions. And that's not something that we as individuals can do unless we're a president or a prime minister or the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world. We just can't implement these solutions at scale.
Hmm.
So really talking about what we can do as individuals, what we can do as families
Hmm.
is really important. And that's part of why I helped start Science Moms,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
which is an organization of mothers who are climate scientists, because we wanted to share family-friendly tips of what we can do together as families to make a difference.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you do so much. Just another great thing that you do. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, everybody should definitely check that out. And we're closing in on time, actually. So I want to ask the last question, and then we'll let you go. But this is more of a conversation, I guess, for at the university level. If students want to make an impact locally, at their university, and they know that maybe the endowment of their university or some other financial part of the university is investing in fossil fuels, how can they go about building momentum and change at their university, and who do they need to talk to try to help or encourage the university to divest from fossil fuel?
As a university professor,
Yeah.
there is a secret that a lot of university students don't realize, and that is that the administration listens more to students than it does to faculty. Why? Because it pays the faculty's salaries, but students pay the administration's salaries. so,
Yeah.
so having students speak up about why is our campus not powered by clean energy? What does our campus recycling or food waste program look like?
Mm-hmm.
Food waste is a huge source of heat
Yeah.
trapping gases. Has our endowment divested from fossil fuels? These are really important questions to ask, and students are the perfect ones to ask this. Now, let me also say, if the administration doesn't immediately say, oh, you're right, so sorry, we'll change, don't be discouraged. That's
Yeah.
normal. There are many examples of universities where students advocated for years.
Mm.
And they were told no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden it just reached critical mass and boom, the university changed. So keep at it, because you don't know. It's sort of like you're adding you're adding an extra straw to the camel's back. And
Yeah.
when that final straw hits, that's when something's going to change. And so each of us truly can make a difference. And using our voice is one of the most powerful things that we can do. Using our voice is how we change the system. And in order
Mm-hmm.
to fix climate change, we have to change our system.
Yeah, exactly. And I think something I've learned from other efforts that I've been involved with is kind of looking at the university's mission statement or their values and trying to, again, incorporate those values into how does that, fold into how we're either contributing to or trying to fight against climate change. And that could maybe be a way to talk to administration at your university if we're professing, we have this value, but we're not really acting on it. Maybe we should change what we're doing.
Exactly. And that is part of the discussion that we're having right now at the Nature Conservancy. So
Mm.
I joined the Nature Conservancy as their chief scientist last year. And as a climate scientist, I'm very conscious of the carbon footprint of our travel.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
many others are too. And so just having conversations where we work, wherever we work, about how can we really reflect our values and the choices that we make as an organization, whether it's related to travel, whether it's related to transportation, to facilities, to food, to
mhm,
energy sources, and even how we show up. So after being a student, typically most people will go out and get a job. Does your company have a science-based target?
mm,
If not, why not? Maybe they could if you
mhm,
ask for that. And then as
mhm,
part of the science-based target, companies have to inventory their heat trapping gas emissions, and they have to have goals to reduce them consistent with the Paris targets. And I can tell you that most companies that have science-based targets, it was not the person in charge of the company who just sort of woke up one morning and was like, we have to do
mhm,
this. Typically, it's people within the company who start raising it,
mhm,
using their voices to advocate for this change. And the more and more people hear that, I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't we have a science-based target? Or why aren't
mhm,
we doing this? And
mhm.
that's the momentum we need to make change happen. And every single one of us can participate in that.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So thank you so much. I think this all points back to, I know what you say often is the best way to combat climate change is to talk about it. So I just hope this conversation is encouraging to everybody, whether it's in your classroom, at home with your family, or even at the university level, that you find a way to talk about climate change, why it matters to you, and you try to make a difference in that way. So thank you
Exactly.
so much, Dr. Hayhoe. Thank you for your time and all your wisdom. And we hope to see you again.
Thank you.